presentation of the third FICIL Sentiment Index. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to be here this morning and to open the official launch of the FICIL Sentiment Index. The FICIL Sentiment Index was established back in 2015 in close cooperation between the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga and Foreign Investors Council in Latvia. The main idea behind it was to get insights from the biggest foreign investors operating in Latvia regarding the investment climate, summarize the key concerns, evaluate existing and potential drivers of Latvia's competitiveness in order to stimulate investment. Today we are launching already the third FICIL Sentiment Index. Our agenda for today is first, there will be a presentation of the FICIL Sentiment Index results and main findings by Professor Arnis Sauka. It will take approximately 40 minutes and it will be in English, so please make sure you have the necessary equipment if you need it. And it will be followed by a panel discussion among policy makers entitled Building Trust, Setting the Agenda for 2018 and the Way Forward. The panel discussion will be in Latvian language. There will be a possibility afterwards to ask questions and at the end of the panel, and also to continue conversations afterwards during the coffee time. But before we go into details about the investment climate in Latvia, I would like to say a few thank yous. First of all, a big thank you to the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga and Professor Arnis Sauka for this partnership and cooperation. We hope this is going to be continued in the future as well. A big thank you to all the companies that took part in this research, to CEOs, to senior managers, many of whom I see today present in SSE. Thank you very much for your time and contribution. And a big thank you also to the Embassy of United Kingdom and Embassy of United States in Latvia, who have generously supported FICIL activities and this event in particular. So I hope we have a stimulating and productive morning here at the SSE Riga. And without further ado, please welcome Arnis Sauka, Associate Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga for the presentation of the FICIL Sentiment Index 2017. Arnis, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Yeah, I was about to ask. Yeah, so you could take seats. So now when all the ministers has taken the seats and everything else looks great. Good morning again. Indeed, it is my pleasure to see all of you here and at least some of you for the third time already. And I have to say that over these 3 years, and actually much more than that, we have developed quite nice cooperation with FICIL. I think we have become almost friends, if not friends. And I also have to confess as a researcher of entrepreneurship processes that I admire knowledge and skills of many entrepreneurs and managers, those that represent foreign investors here in this audience. But this is not the main reason why we are talking about foreign investment trends in Latvia today. The main reason is actually this one. This is because of the impact that foreign investors make to the economy of Latvia. See, if we define foreign investors as companies that has turnover of over 145,000 euros and at least 50% of foreign investors of foreign capital, then we actually see that this is 1/5 of the all companies in Latvia in general, and this 1/5 of Latvian companies, that operates in Latvia, contributes substantially to the economy of Latvia. So just a few figures, 36% of the total social tax contribution, which is very important for all of us, 48% of the all taxes that are paid, and also the turnover and the total profit, and more than a quarter of the total workforce that is employed. So for this reason, of course, it is very important to talk about foreign investment in general in this country, also because it looks like, at least when it comes to the reported and this is what I have to say as the shadow economy researcher, reported indicators of the business, these companies seem to be much more productive than companies on average in Latvia. So there's much things that we can learn from foreign investors. Well, foreign investment is like economy. It goes up and down, but it goes up and down faster than these economic cycles that we know. And for this reason, and of course the first positive news is already here, that we see in 2017 that there has been a very positive tendency in foreign investment inflow into the Latvia. It was somewhat different in 2016, but then it was pretty nice also in 2015. But would we have a longer perspective, we would see that indeed we go up and down. And for this reason, actually, I think we should explore why this is the case. And there are, of course, several explanations. For instance, one or two big investors can come into the country, and then if somebody invests 100 or 200 millions, then of course the slope goes up and everything looks nice. But in reality, nothing has really changed apart from this one or two investors coming in. Then, of course, some industries might grow, like IT industry, for instance, and then also this looks better. But apart from that, there are also other factors that influence why investors choose or choose not to come to Latvia. And this is actually the key reason why we are exploring these issues, aiming to provide with the policymakers, including those that are sitting here today with us, with some kind of more in-depth intelligence knowledge in order how to foster an environment for foreign investors in Latvia. It is actually not just about fostering environment for foreign investors in Latvia. As you will see later, we will talk about the factors that actually are very crucially important also for the local companies, right? So when we are talking about opinions of foreign investors, we are indeed talking about the economic or entrepreneurship climate in general in Latvia, factors that are important for any company that is operating in this country. Having said all this, of course, even though I'm the one who is standing in front of you today, this is a teamwork, and I would not manage this on my own for sure. There are many people that has contributed to this report and to this finding. Zlata Gunters and Marta herself, of course, has done a substantial work in terms of developing the guidelines for interviews and many other things. We have Eriks and Elva, and we have PR people who designed these nice slides and helped us to distribute the message to the media. We had members of Foreign Investors Council in Latvia who actually interviewed other foreign investors, so that we have like one-to-one person on the same level talking to each other. Otherwise, you might not get reliable data. And we have British Embassy, we have US Embassy, and we have many other supporters. Sorry if I haven't mentioned someone who has helped in developing this index. So thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks for all of you for contributing. Well, focus of this FICIL Sentiment Index study is changing over the years. This year we have kind of three key main aspects. So the key aspects, the first key aspect is that in 2015 and 2016 studies, we have identified several obstacles, reasons why for investors think that it is somewhat problematic to do some business in this country. And we are trying to measure the progress within these indicators, asking for investors to assess how do they assess the work of the policymakers, and how do they see whether there is a progress in terms of development of foreign investment climate in Latvia over the past 12 months. So that is one aspect. We also ask about various current initiatives, so the initiatives that policymakers are currently initiating in order to improve the foreign investment climate in Latvia and entrepreneurship climate in general in this country. And this year we also put emphasis on asking how actually foreign investors deal with the existing external challenges. What are the key strengths? Why they are actually here, even though they are sometimes big challenges. In some years more, in some years less, as you will see. So these are the three aspects that we will look on today. What we did, well, even though we are an academic institution, this is very much practical study. We will not bother you with the theories, even though this is very much theory-grounded research. We will talk about practical issues. We will actually share with you insights what we got from interviewing 42 foreign investors, the key foreign investors in this country. And as I said, these interviews were made by the FICIL board members. So these are these 42 companies, and I mean, I don't know which slide I like best, either this colorful one which shows the big companies, or this slide that shows the impact of those companies that we interviewed. So altogether, these 42 companies with the subsidiaries. Sorry, I still cannot express this word. They contribute 11% to the total tax revenue to Latvia, and you see other contributions as well. So this is, we can say, representative example for investors that we interviewed, people that have very powerful impact in making decisions whether to invest in this country or not. So again, I mean, this slide or this slide, probably, I think this one is somewhat more colorful, so I like it maybe a bit more. And as every year, we, of course, this is qualitative study. We ask for opinions. We get in-depth insights from the opinions. But we also try to somehow measure these opinions in numbers. And we measure these numbers when it comes to these 9 or 10 indicators altogether, starting from the assessment of foreign investments when it comes to Latvia environment with regards to availability of labor, ending with the standard of living in Latvia as it is perceived by foreign investors in this country. So quite a lot of range of factors that we look on in this study, and that's something that we will spend next 30 minutes, I think, talking about. So to the results, something that is probably of most interest. Well, as I showed you, we have a big increase, actually increase for more than 5 years as compared to 2016 when it comes to the inflow of foreign investment in Latvia. And well, this is not probably surprising that also assessment of the attractiveness of investment to Latvia has also improved along with these numbers. Well, it's still not very good. We measure this on scale from 1 to 5, where 3 would be that there has been some positive improvements, but it's also not 2 anymore, right? So when it comes to dynamics, this is positive dynamics that we can observe. Well, these are some of the quotes, and in the report, those of you who will find time to read the report, it's quite substantial. But yet, you know, you have quite also important people talking, so it is worth maybe reading this. You will have many reasons why in some cases it is still 2.5, not 3 or 4. Also, the foreign investors' assessment of policymakers' efforts to improve the investment climate in Latvia has substantially improved. This is what we do every year, and this is what we will do also the next year, because every year we agree with the policymakers in one or another setting on the key issues that should be addressed in order to improve for investment climate in this country. And then we follow up next year asking for investors, do they believe that these promises, if I may, has been fulfilled? And if yes, on what extent? So again, we see that the promises that the government made, I think it was High Council meeting when we presented this last year, the promises that were made last year has been somewhat fulfilled according to viewpoints of the foreign investors, which is a good sign, but it's also not 4 or 5 yet. Yeah, so still potential to grow. So these are the factors that we have identified back in 2015. When we really asked simply an open question, identified back in 2015, and now we are measuring progress within these indicators every year, asking also every year whether, according to viewpoint of foreign investors, there has been any other emerging new trends, emerging new challenges that has come out? Well, there are no new trends, there are no new challenges. They are still the same challenges that we identified in 2015, yet emphasis are changing. So let me just go quickly through each of those indicators to just shed a bit of light on how investors see progress within each of those, I think, very crucial areas when it comes to making the business. Well, I mean, demography, I mean, it's not surprising really. It's not very positive trend in this country. Actually, we can see from the quotes that investors are not very happy with demography, and some investors say that it's not really, it's not just for the investors, it's for the country in general. And I mean, also nobody expects, I think, in this audience that demography can be changed in 1 to 3 years. Yet, what we expect, I think, is that there should be some positive trend, at least, so that we can expect in a long term some positive outcome, right? Well, what we see from this 2017 study, and we will come back to this later in terms of the figures, there is a negative trend actually, and which is bothering. Yeah, you know, the quotes you can read yourselves, and you also have material. Those of you who didn't take, so I will not just spend too much time on the quotes. When it comes to the access to the labor, this is another issue that is probably the key, one of the most problematic according to the viewpoints of foreign investors. This is not the first, and this is not the only study that emphasized the problems with availability of labor. And investors are talking not just about intelligent people that has to be headhunted from all over the world by any means, as Estonians do, or as many other countries, as all countries actually do, because all countries these days, the ones who want to develop, they fight for the talent, right? And there are no unnecessary obstacles put for attracting the talent. But foreign investors also talk about simple workers, if I may say so, all type of labor that is needed for development of the economy. And obviously, as the economy grows, we will need more people. And if demography will not change, and demography will not solve this issue, that is, of course, out of the question for the next 10 years, then somehow it should be solved. So some suggestions how this could be done are here already, but there are some more also into the report. And again, this is not what I invented. This is what foreign investors say, right? So please bear this in mind. The healthcare system in Latvia, well, those of you who watch television or read news, you know that there has been lots of discussion and there has been more money for the healthcare system. And this is what also foreign investors actually say, that that government has promised progress as of next year, right? But we don't see much positive signals about foreign investors' attitude towards this indicator in the country. Actually, 71% believe that there has been no progress whatsoever if even comes to the comparison between 2016 and 2017, and there are just 5% from all the interview that say that there has been some progress. Yet, we know that reforms are under the way, and who knows what kind of picture we will see next year. I hope this will be better. Then from these three indicators that are most important in terms of the kind of negative, we move to some of those that are kind of in between, 50-50, if I may say so. The court system. The court system. Well, you also see some positive things here, but in terms of 26% saying that there has been some progress at least in terms of the court system, and you see also some comments like there are some citizens in jail, some parliamentary inquiry committees, so there should be some improvement. And we have several court cases from our experience is getting better, and you see that these are different industries that are represented. Yet, as similarly like previous years, foreign investors criticize court system for being a bit slow, not that efficient. So these would be kind of the two keywords, which would be kind of also on the negative side. But as I said, once again, it's not completely black. It's kind of a bit gray issue here. Well, uncertainty. This is still mentioned a lot throughout the report, and we don't see uncertainty when it comes to threat from Russia, as we saw like 2 years ago, when we had a bit different situation. But unfortunately, and I don't know whether Minister of Finance will like this, but here and also we will see in other places, foreign investors are skeptical or at least reserved when it comes to the impact, positive impact of the, not all of them I have to say already, but at least part of, and a big part of those that we interviewed, a bit skeptical and reserved when it comes to the effect of the tax system. Some actually would argue that the tax system, in the way it has been implemented, might actually even increase uncertainty. Whether this is subjective or objective, we will see. I mean, we don't know, but maybe this is the past that scares people. There has been a lot of tax changes and lots of changes in legislation, of course. So maybe this is the explanation, but we can see some skepticism here. Interestingly enough, also investors talk about tax system and they talk about the quality of business legislation, right? Again, maybe this is something that has been discussed a lot on the media, and that's why it is mentioned so often, also in this report. But we say that there are, well, for instance, so which would be the quote, you know. There is at least one manufacturing company who say that this is the motivating tax system, which has made everything 2 times worse, right? Yeah, so that is one opinion, but it's not just about the tax system, and it's not just about the criticism. In general, when foreign investors, and you can see this in these quotes, they are quite representative of those opinions that we've got that we also compiled in the report. It's that. As I say it, investors would like to see much more analytics when it comes to developing business legislation, because quite often, according to the viewpoint of foreign investors, changes in business legislation are made quite fast, without thinking enough, without attracting enough of intelligence. And then, of course, what happens is uncertainty, because changes has to be implemented, and all the things that comes from that. So this is something that I've been preaching myself from here and all the other places I've been talking to, that analytics, improvement in analytics is something that is very crucial if you want to grow, if you want to become more competitive, and if you want to solve these more and more challenging problems that comes with the development. Well, about the shadow economy, we will talk more in May, of course, so we'll not spend too much time on this slide here today. But also, this is something that is not liked by quite many foreign investors in this country. The shadow economy is enormous in Latvia. You don't need to be a genius in mathematics to calculate that we are losing money. Yeah. So I'm not genius in mathematics as well, but even I can calculate how big it is, and we know it is pretty big. Yet also foreign investors say that they see positive trends when it comes to dealing with the shadow economy, and indeed there are positive trends when it comes to dealing with the shadow economy. We have lot more power, lot more intelligence, lot more people that are working with this issue than we used to have a couple of years ago. So, you know, all of us are expecting some progress, and there is actually a progress in this area. There's no doubt, and we actually see this also in this report. You know, there are 70% actually who say yes, that there is progress, and 36% say that there is some progress. So it's not that bad sign at all. Well, then the quality of tax system. I put one nice quote here, because we didn't have that many of those, but I think this is very pragmatic quote, and I would I would like to believe this quote myself, that you can, I don't know whether you can read it from there, but basically the idea here is that you cannot overemphasize the impact of the tax system. It is important, but it will not solve everything. There are many other factors that contribute to the growth of economy. And this is actually the single foreign investor who said that Parliament has actually improved the tax system if you compare to what it was initially. Developed in cooperation with the Bank of Latvia, in cooperation with World Bank and other experts that were attracted. There was lots of intelligence actually attracted when it comes to developing the system, the tax system. And I think the Minister of Finance can talk much more about this issue, and you will probably discuss this also in the panel discussion. Yet, we have also quotes like this, which is maybe a person had a pessimistic day. We don't know, right? But maybe not. Then we have the quote like the tax system is the best recent example of how not to do things. There were good propositions before, and then it was all completely ruined, which is completely opposite to this direction. So, and of course it comes from the same industry actually. So it's also not black and white, but we can definitely see that there is at least some reserved feelings about the positive impact of the tax system, and we will of course see who is right and who is wrong, because tax system has been implemented and it will be implemented, and then for us economists it will be easier to judge whether it was good or bad, so we are not the ones who will implement it anyway. Then to me as somebody who works for the institution that is within the higher education and the science, I was very actually positive to see that there has been quite good signs from the foreign investors in Latvia when it comes to the level of education and science in this country. Of course, we still see some quotes like this, and many of them that the professors should be more advanced, and the way they teach should be more advanced, and that people often don't have soft skills in Latvia. But on other hand, there are also some more positive signs. Something that shows also this part shows that at least according to the viewpoint of our investors, we see some good signs in science and education system. And this one is actually I think the most positive issue that we've got. I don't think, to me, it did not really come as a surprise, because I also follow the media, and I see how this government moved things forward. The ones that has been talked about a lot during the previous years, but never really launched. So you can criticize, and I can criticize, whoever can criticize about the way it is launched, but it is launched, and that is a big step forward. But also it involves communication, and the communication is an essential part. And in fact, for investors admire the way policymakers communicate with them. We still see, of course, some skepticism here, like they learn how to make nice infographics, right? Things like this. But overall, we see that foreign investors are more satisfied with the way the policymakers communicate. And Ministry of Economics has been emphasized several times. So some people quoted Ms. Rasharadens about good communication, and also Ministry of Finance and Minister of Finance herself as a good communicator. So I think this is also very important, because we always talk about solving issues together, and visual communication, of course, this is pretty hard to achieve. And then we go to the kind of the essence of this study, putting this in numbers, as I said, and basically the numbers tell what I said already. So we see demography. Where is the demography? Demography is here. So it was the lowest evaluated indicator, and from 1 to 5 scale, where 5 is good and 1 is very bad, it has become to 1.6. Well, sure, we have it's not a major be careful with these figures. It's 1 to 5 scale, and it's point something change, and it might not. And these are 42, not 400 companies that are interviewed, and there are many biases I could tell, and any one of you could identify here. But at least we see some trend in these regards. Then availability of labor is not becoming better, and this is what I said already. So if there was not basically big difference 2015, 2016, then we see kind of pretty big drop here. What is good? What is good is demand for products and services that is increasing, for instance, and the level of the hard infrastructure is also increasing. So these are definitely good signs. This one probably comes with the development of economy, but this cannot come without involvement of the policymakers, right? So this is so far about the key areas of assessment. Yeah, maybe just one slide more. Standard of living, and we are talking about, you know, serious people that are making assessment. So these are in this audience, that would be the top professor who is judging on top students' work, right? So it's an important assessment in this regards, and I think this is not that bad, right? 3.7, 3.9 out of this was out of 5. It's pretty good indicator, I think. So apart from the criticism, I think this is criticism when it comes to development, when it comes to the issues that should be developed. Overall, foreign investors are not that unhappy when it comes to living here and when it comes to assessing how people live in general in this country. So, well, I have too many slides and not that much time, but let me go through also other parts of the study. So this is how foreign investors are assessing currently initiated and implemented initiatives by policymakers. And this is good and this is not good. Efficient, not efficient, right? It's not that 0% of reinvested profit is very important for all investors that we interviewed. It might be actually more important for those that are in shadows or black economy, more in shadows. Foreign investors invest anyway, most of them, if not all of them, but they all admit that this is a crucial issue when it comes to, well, government said they will do this and they've done it. So they've been very efficient in terms of implementing this initiative and moving this forward. Well, 0% bureaucracy is not really the case, yes, and we will see it a bit later. And there are many things, and it's smart migration, of course, but it should be started, yes, if I may. Exactly. This is start. Startup ecosystem looks good, and openness of economy looks also pretty well. And insolvency regulation, something that all journalists keep asking when it comes to, when FICIL is mentioned, then this is probably something that all journalists ask, and this is of course normal because FICIL has worked a lot on this issue. So we see, and also consult first is we see it's in the middle. So probably also here we can add some effort to make it move a bit up. So final 3 issues. And here I will just mention a few main things because of the lack of time. Well, Latvians, and I'm Latvian myself, but we sometimes, or quite often, think that we are very unique when it comes to the economy, when it comes to development. And every time somebody that comes from somewhere and gives us advice, we say, well, you know, those people from the World Bank or OECD or EBRD, they don't really understand the context. And of course, in partly it is true, and they just give us advice, and we are the ones who have to make decisions. I mean, the government, the policymakers, has to do this. But in fact, we see this also in other countries that quite often when we are addressing and we are trying to solve some issue, on the paper things look quite good. So if I go and talk with Asher Adams, for instance, Arvils would tell me that, you know, come on, I have this paper, I have that paper, I have this paper, look on the initiatives that we made, And he might actually believe that this is true, and things are fine. And sorry, Arvil, for using you as an example. It's not you actually, but it's I've seen this. I've seen this talking with also other people from the government. Yet when we talk about entrepreneurs, they say, oh, "Come on, don't they understand?" Okay, on the paper this is how it is, but in reality it is a bit different. And we were wondering, we asked foreign investors to identify some cases from their experience or the experiences that they know from others, whether there has been a situation when on a paper things look actually great, but in reality it's not really the case. And we have got plenty of very interesting insights, and again, I don't have time to share all of them, but they were mostly concerned with bureaucracy, including the e-systems that are kind of in the place but don't really work. There was comment about Latvia LV portal, which looks kind of fine, but kind of not always. There were some comments about the communication of State Revenue Service with entrepreneurs that yes, there is a EDS, but who understands this? These type of things. Unethical or illegal behavior, there were comments that from procurement kind of part that yes, should be fine, should look nice on the paper, but we can talk about number of cases when procurement procedures has been awful, and there is clear signs of bureaucracy, for instance. About the court system, there was a quote that Minister not just Minister himself, but in general, we often see arguments that the court system is improving, yet entrepreneurs, the foreign investors actually say that it's not always the case. They spend too much money and too much time on solving kind of relatively easy issues, yet on the paper everything looks fine. Then in some cases, people say that it's still a bit hard to work with State Revenue Service. Sometimes they mention one specific rule that was implemented, which was fine, which is still on the paper fine, but not really in the reality. And there is lots of uncertainty issues. For instance, some say that sometimes government opens some document and say that there was just some minor technical changes that will be made, but changes are made substantial, so they might not guess what will happen later. So those are just a few things that I can remember by heart. There's something on slides on the bureaucracy, for instance. And, sorry, I will just not have that much time to go. If you need to achieve something, you need to make sure that the issue and topic gets into the governmental or some sectoral planning document. Otherwise, nothing will happen, even though it shouldn't be like that. In fact, so e-governments, something that I mentioned already, bureaucracy widespread. So there is a case with construction company, construction of new terminal, and this person is wondering, how comes that it takes so much time and endless corruption and we have KNAB, right? But then reasoning still happens, and how this could be. So whether these guys do the right job and some other few things, and regardless of the problems and the shortcomings, as we know, investors are still here and investment is increasing. And we also asked for investors what would be what in their opinion would be the key what are the factors that allow them to compete here, to stay here, and actually to overcome challenges that are sometimes often brought by the external environment. So what kind of internal and external resources do foreign investors are using in terms to achieve the competitiveness that they have? And as we know, they are productive, more productive on average than the local companies. So we were wondering about this issue as well. And again, just a short thing, just a short overview of many nice, insightful calls that we got. For instance, companies actually say that despite of the things that are happening around, they have code of ethics, and they will not bribe, they will not involve in share economy, they will not do many other things, even though it is kind of somewhat harder for them to compete because many claim that they're here for the long term, and that is why it's important. Whether they say this and do this as well, we don't know, but at least they say this, and this is nice. Tax avoidance, right? So we know environment, but we will never involve in this. Strengthening our internal policies, we have e-learning tools. We are trying to just avoid penalties. We are ready to invest huge amount of money. We know that there is a big bureaucracy. Okay, then we will invest. We know the rules of the game. We will invest more time in order to comply with these requirements, waiting when it will be over, of course, but still the business should be done today, and even though it costs more for us than in other countries, we will still do this. So that is, this is also something about bureaucratic procedures. Availability of resources. Investors try to cooperate as much as they can with, for instance, with also with universities. Well, this is a specific case for, of course. Yeah, there is consultancy company who says that when they need the employee, it takes quite a lot of time to employ that employee, so they would also need to run the programs in order to work with their potential employees well in advance. So there is construction challenge, and regions with smaller municipalities it is better so to work and to explain and kind of to also to try to educate the policymakers or others that are involved. This is sort of one of the missions of the for investors. Language requirements is a challenge, and there are also some other things, some ways how foreign investors trying to deal with this issue. And of course, local intelligence very often is not enough to run the business, and very often companies, foreign investors, rely on their networks, on the knowledge that they can attract when it comes to the employees, and also kind of research and other issues. So this is in very short, but those of you who will find time to read the report, you will see that there are much more insights that foreign investors give with this regards. And this is the final slide, which is also actually quite positive when it comes to if we compare to the previous year. We see that actually as many, even though we had 32, I think, and now we have 42 foreign investors that we interviewed, we see that 19% are not decided whether they will increase investment next years or not, but the ones that will increase investment has increased, and the ones who will not increase the investment has decreased. So we see this probably also in line with the total inflow of foreign investment. And just very quickly, those who said, yes, we plan to increase investment in Latvia, we see actually a big investment coming in. 120 millions, there was 110 million over some years, 100 million for the next 10 years, 1 million, 75 million over 3 years. So this is lots of money. This is lots of jobs to be offered if there is a workforce, yes, which will have to be solved in one way or another. Well, investors will solve it anyway. I mean, you can be sure about that. And by any means, they will of course solve it, because if IT company can go away easily, they can reallocate the office to any other place, then not many who has invested can do this. And if this is the matter of survival, then people do strange things sometimes, right? So then there are some who say strict no, not that many. One company says that Latvia has lost the competition in Lithuania, so they are moving to Lithuania. Obviously, too much tax uncertainty, not enough focus on the grey economy, and some other criteria that is why that particular company is not investing. But then there are many who are in between, and this is what policymakers or politicians understand best, that this is electorate which is a target electorate who has not decided right? But that is worth very much kind of addressing, and so many are considering, but it depends. It depends on factors such as how the tax reform will go, whether there will be workforce, and probably many others. And this is where you can find the whole FICIL Sentiment Index and read it in much more depth, those of you who are interested in what this year key foreign investors to Latvia wanted to share with us in order to improve the foreign investment climate for foreign investment to this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sauka, for this presentation. And we start the second part, which is a panel discussion. We will switch now to Latvian, so please make sure you have the equipment for you. Paldies Saukas kungam par prezentāciju. Un mēs sākam mūsu...
Thank you, Professor Sauka, again for the presentation. We'll now go or move to the panel discussion. We'd like to ask all the panelists to come to front and take their seats in the panel. Thank you. Today's panel discussion will be moderated by Mārtiņš Vaivars, who's an entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and the CEO of Tone Board. He has graduated from Oxford University, and he asked me not to say this, but he is, in fact, the winner of the debate competition of the Cambridge University and third best speaker in Oxford University, or third best debater in Oxford University. Let's see how well he moderates the panel discussion. Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second section of today's presentation. I'm happy that we're switching to Latvia. I would like to first and foremost thank Mr. Sauka for sort of taking the temperature of the Latvian economy and explaining what's happening in terms of business environment and investment climate. However, apart from diagnostics, in healthcare, you need to also suggest a treatment plan, if you will, an individual treatment plan, or suggest improvements that have to be implemented. And I'm happy that among today's panelists we have prominent representatives who represent different political parties, different organizations or state institutions, and I would like to thank them for joining our discussion and for agreeing to talk about particular improvements that we should implement to improve the business environment and investment climate. So I would like to introduce to you the Minister for the Economy, Arnis Sauka, Dan Reiznieks, also Minister for Finance, Robert Zīle, an MEP, and Uldis Rutkaste from the Bank of Latvia Monetary Department. I would like to ask panelists to stick to a couple of minutes when talking about each issue presented, because we have only 40 minutes for the discussion. So we'll basically focus on three issues. These issues are not directly linked to the presentation. We will sort of limit our discussion to these three issues, but these three issues have been chosen together with FICIL in order to arrive at specific, improvements that would contribute to a better investment climate. So let us now start the discussion. And can you hear me? Well, I'll rather use this microphone so that you can hear me. So we have three topics that we will discuss: demography and availability of workforce. The second topic is tax system predictability and sort of legislative certainty, if you will. And last but not least, we will talk about other issues. So when it comes to accessibility of workforce, we talked about human resource constraints, attraction of skilled labor from other countries, and we talked also about negative demographics that are sort of reducing the sort of consumer base in Latvia. I would like to ask the Minister of Economy to present, what is the opinion of the Ministry and how these issues can be solved. Yes, thank you. Since I'm the first sort of government representative to take the floor, I would like to stress that government is quite positive about economic growth. Overall, if you look at the economy, you can see a very balanced growth. In all sectors, we have positive growth, and investment and current account deficit are in balance, which sort of makes us positive about the next 12 months, and most probably the growth will be as forecasted, and we will have at least 4% growth this year. However, at the same time, demographic problems and workforce availability have become sort of sore issues. If you look at the unemployment, which is around 8%, it is of course a big figure if you consider the unemployment, especially in eastern Latvia. If you look at the unemployment in major sectors, the average unemployment is around 4%, which means that there's a shortage of workforce. And we have estimated in the ministry that based on registered vacancies, which is 16,000, we will face a shortage of workforce, which will amount to more than, in fact, 16,000 in the next 4 years. Now, as to the root causes of this challenge, there is one fundamental macroeconomic imbalance that we need to address here in Latvia. And what I'm talking about is the negative demographics, not only because of the mortality rates and birth rates, but also due to outward migration. I do apologize for cutting you short, but Mr. Sauka has been, quite elaborately analyzing the problems. But what are the proposals? What are the solutions after the elections? What is government going to do in order to solve these problems? Instead of describing what the situation, you should rather give us the solutions. But it was, an important background to understand where we sort of come from. Now, what we see is that the outward migration is bigger than the inward migration. In 2016, it was 12,000 against 8,000, so we need to improve in terms of migration, and that requires to analyze the sort of the wage structure of our country. The average wage is 1,000 euros, and if you compare it with countries of destination or the countries to which those people go, then this is something that we should focus much more extensively. And if you look at the wage structure here in Latvia, around 13% are those who earn more than 1,000. So the rest of the people are basically those who might potentially leave Latvia. That's why government needs to think about, raising the sort of the share of the population which earns more than, these 1,000 euros. And we should sort of target, or we will be targeting 50,000 people who should earn more than 1,000 euros in the next years, and in order to bring this number from 13 to 20. I apologize for cutting you short. We have only 10 minutes for this topic, and I would like to ask now Aldis to provide his comments on what needs to be done in order to bring in workers from other countries, to facilitate their visas and language skills and so on and so forth.
Thank you. In brief, I'd like to say that we saw in the report that labor is still a topical problem for investors. And if we look at economical cycles, then at the moment we are in an upwards trend. However, there are two worrying elements. So first of all, we have an 8% unemployment rate and economic growth of 4 to 5% instead of up to 12% as we had seen in a previous period. So this actually means that the potential for economic growth has lessened, and we have to look at not only how to attract labor from other countries. I definitely support smart immigration, so attracting highly qualified employees. But there are also other measures that we have to look at in terms of immigration. So one problem is that the natural unemployment rate in Latvia is continuously high. It's about 10%, which is a very high indicator. So this means that there are a lot of workers, and if we look at the unemployment rate in general, it's at a broader angle, if we look at the unemployment, 16%. So there are plenty of people that are out of work and are not actually searching for a new job. So if we look at the long-term unemployed, then these are people that we have failed to involve in the labor market. So we need to work on various policy areas, one of these being requalification. We have institutions that are working on this issue, and however, we are spending relatively less on requalification measures than other EU member states. And we are investing more money in measures that activate the labor force in the short term, but do not provide the necessary skills or technical skills and education that people need to overcome unemployment. As if we look at the unemployed, then people with higher education are only 4% of the unemployed. People with a lower level of education are a significantly higher amount of the unemployed. So we see that we have a problem with the interconnection between the supply and demand and the education sector as a link to the labor force. So yes, we will look at education later on, but now I give the floor to the Minister of Finance. So since over the past years we have lost a significant percentage of our population, so we have to look at our options. Either we facilitate immigration or try to activate the people still here. So the moment in the past year we have issued about 5,000 work permits, and only a small percentage of these have been issued to qualified workers. So we have another measure at our disposal which may be discussed, is that when we bring in foreign workers, that we have to pay them the average salary in the sector rather than the average salary in the state. So if we look at unemployment rates, we see that we still have 18,000 long-term unemployed people, so this is a high number, and we have a lot of unused talent. We have a Social Integration Fund report that was presented recently that employers have a lot of doubts about certain social groups. For example, many employers still were not willing to employ people because of their sexual orientation or because of physical disability or those who have been imprisoned before. So we have to work on improving these issues. Third of all, if we look at education, we see that this misalignment is still there. Most students are still studying social sciences, so we would like to return to the idea that we need to establish compulsory exams in physics and chemistry so as to facilitate people going into studying technical sciences. And of course, we still have the problem of people leaving the country because they cannot find a decent job for their level of education. Yes, thank you. And one more comment about our internal resources and how to keep people here. I think the government has already done a lot, and we have to work on providing housing. The housing program will now be available not only to young families but also young specialists, and we've already agreed with the local governments that they will come up with their vision of how to improve the housing program in the regions, in the big cities around Latvia where people want to stay but they simply don't have where to live. So this is another problem we will work on. I will not repeat what my colleagues already said. One aspect that we have missed in looking at employment is the European aspect. We are only looking at Latvia on its own. However, Latvia is a small economy focused on the single market. And here we have to talk about posted workers, the situation with this in the whole of Europe. Also, there's much uncertainty about logistics and transport throughout the union and how this impacts workers and employment. So these are issues that our government has to work on in this coming and upcoming years. And if we look at European investments, then obviously it's clear that the investments from the cohesion fund are beginning to be reduced, and Latvia will no longer be receiving a cohesion fund funding for the next period. So this will also create new problems and call for new solutions to be sought. Retail businesses have indicated that actually if the Russian market was open, then it could improve the situation. So there are many elements that are actually outside of Latvia that still impact the situation here. So Mr. Asheradins, would you like to comment? Well, I think there are 4 government priorities that we have to focus on for the labor issue. First of all is improving the effectiveness of the government itself. The State Chancellery is already speaking about improving the effectiveness of the government institutions. There are also many initiatives to improve the effectiveness of state-owned companies. Then the next issue is smart immigration. The government has set up several working groups to analyze various aspects of this issue, and we hope to look at or examine simplified immigration rules for certain categories of workers. We expect to discuss this issue at one of the upcoming government meetings. So it was already mentioned, one of the initiatives that we are working on is this average salary that ought to be paid to workers brought in. And then another element is the housing program. Obviously, people will not live where work where they don't have where to live. Valmiera city is a good example that has set up or constructed new housing units for young specialists. And various funding has been already allocated to various new housing initiatives and construction of housing units to facilitate the people staying in the regions, because they will have where to live so as they can continue to work in the region. Another thing we're working on is improving economic effectiveness. One major issue here is lifetime education. We have opened the market for various initiatives to promote this professional top-up courses and provide various training programs. So many of these initiatives are also focused on people that already are working but would like to obtain new skills or top up their existing knowledge. Also, of course, we have the problem that many employees find it problematic that they are tasked with new duties, but they do not have the necessary skills. So I will remind you that our aim here today is not only to speak, but also to discuss these issues and discuss practical solutions. So I will perhaps give you a short summary of what I heard from the speakers. So we have initiatives about requalification, where we are quite lacking in investment so far. We also discussed various the improvement of various nationwide networks, such as the school network and government institution network, so making the work of these more effective and thus improving the overall situation. So moving on to our next issue, and the first question will be for the Minister of Finance. So our second issue is the foreseeability of taxes and legislation. This is something that was raised by many investors in the report. So many investors noted that the tax system has been changed often and a lot, and thus created uncertainty, and also various legislative amendments lacking analytical basis create further uncertainty. Yes, we saw that in this year's report, a lot of attention had been given to the tax reform. Positive attitudes towards the zero rate for reinvested profit, but also a lot of negative reactions to other parts of the tax reform. But I hope that we will overcome this initial skepticism and to see it through and see the results that are planned in the long term. So this is the first year that we did not change any taxes due to the budget. The same was also the case last year. We actually did away with one tax. So for the registration of cargo vehicles. So these tax reforms are coming together with a promise from the government not to make any further changes in the next 3 years. So we have promised that we will not change any of the tax rates for the next 3 years so that the business sector can plan ahead. We will now we will look at how the reforms are being implemented, how they are working in practice. We will make any adjustments if necessary, and I'd also like to thank all the entrepreneurs that have been taking part in the business consultative groups that the government has worked with in the process of coming up with these tax reforms. So I'd like to note the most important elements in my point. So we will change the auditing attitude, and also work on improving how we attract foreign investors and working on the IPA. So as regards this promise to not change taxes for the coming years, are there any other tools that the government can employ to create more certainty for foreign investors? Well, I think that it is very important that we have this commitment from the government to not change taxes for the next 3 years. And if we look at the macroeconomic situation, then the government had decided to look at a broader amount of issues together, or a broader amount of issues than it had looked at before, and try and solve more problems sort of together with complex solutions. And the government has, I think, succeeded in improving also the understandability of the tax system and revoking some taxes that were unclear or not easily understandable. So I think that the commitment to not change the tax system for the next 3 years will also strengthen the system as a whole. We speak about the environment, or the legislative environment, and quality of government services. We have spoken to various consultancy firms and businesses. They say that often enough things are good on paper, but the actual services provided by the institution are still lagging behind what is written on paper. So my question to the Minister of Finance is how to improve the services, for example, by the Internal Revenue Service. As well, mostly we have to work on changing attitudes. It's not only the Internal Revenue Service, it's also other institutions. The Revenue Service has sort of just been the flagship of this issue. But they've already started working on this, and they have achieved results, and businesses have already given positive feedback that the Revenue Service is providing consultations before issuing fines. So this is one positive element, that they are explaining how to correct mistakes rather than just finding them and fining them. So I think this is quite a broad issue. An initiative by the Ministry of Economics is this already mentioned consulting before punishing. And we have 27 institutions under our ministry, and we have been working on changing the way that we assess their work. If beforehand we assess them based on the amount of fines they have issued, for example, or such, then we are changing this attitude that we are making them focus more on helping others understand what they have to do, what their mistakes are, how to reduce these mistakes, and so forth. So I think a lot of institutions have changed their attitude. They have understood that they have to take a seat at the table with the businesses and try to understand how to resolve the situation rather than just coming with their punishments and fines. So these institutions have become more of a sort of cooperation partners for businesses.
Thank you. I have the question to Mr. Ziele, who's not so much sort of linked to what we just discussed, but we just heard from the presentation of Mr. Sauka, we saw that in some quotes, that several businessmen are unhappy with legislative certainty or the predictability of laws, and they are not happy about the amendments, the nature, essence of amendments. They are not happy that at the very last minute, something is pushed into the law, something that hasn't been previously discussed with the business community or hasn't been discussed more broadly. So, Mr. Ziele, do you have any thoughts on this? Well, I'm a member of the European Parliament, which is also a legislative body, and Latvian Parliament quite often sort of tweaks quite significantly, the proposed legislation which is proposed at the European Union level. So this sort of legal or legislative uncertainty is, well, characteristic not only to Latvia but also to other countries. But when it comes to legislation, one thing that you have to remember is that this is the election year, and this year the tax reform will be tested. The tax reform initiated by Dana and successfully implemented by Dana. Nevertheless, after the elections, we will see a different coalition, and this coalition of three political parties will most probably will not be amending the tax system, and there has been an agreement with the Trade and Industry Chamber not to change the tax system. But you should refrain from promises like these, in the election year. And nevertheless, in politics, taxes are very important. And there's one issue that we haven't discussed about. The British embassy is one of the supporters of this event. Therefore, we have to talk about Brexit and the way it will affect the relationship between the UK and the EU, and the future trade relations between the EU and the UK will also, to a large extent, determine the investment flow towards Latvia, and what the trade agreement is going to be. We don't know yet. And then there's also Rail Baltica, which will be constructed over the next 4 years until 2020. Major sort of progress has to be achieved, and it's big money, and China is interested in taking part in Rail Baltica, and the UK as well, which will by then be no longer a member of the European Union. But the European Union is also currently debating legislation concerning the investment screening. How will that affect the investment flow towards Latvia? Well, it's very difficult to predict. So there's a lot of uncertainty in this regard as well. However, I'm sure that those who are planning to invest in Latvia are now waiting for all these issues to be resolved. Now, let me also recap or summarize what we just discussed. So the first thing that we just heard was that, tax reform will remain as it is at the moment, and Dana and Arvils mentioned that. But Arvils already mentioned that we have to be careful with giving promises in the election year, or the promises that we hear in the election year. As regards to government reform or the public administration reform that is being implemented, instead of punishing, public bodies are sort of evaluated, or their performance or one of their KPIs is no longer fines, but rather consulting activities, which is a nice change. Now, this brings us to the last topic that we would like to discuss, and I would like to start by giving the floor to all those who already made some comments regarding science and education without going, in depth, without diving into this. The main problems are lack of excellence. None of the Latvian universities are among top 500 universities in the world. We heard also that there's a problem with structural unemployment. Employers think that there's a mismatch of skills among graduates and the labor market needs and so on and so forth. So all this should go first. Now, when it comes to education, if we look further or beyond the next couple of years, the major challenge for the education system from a business and from the government point of view is going to be, skills. Secondly, I didn't mention it, but somebody else mentioned it somewhere else. But the problem is productivity. So we have low productivity. The productivity is not going, and the workforce or the labor costs are the main sort of driver of growth, whereas in Latvia, productivity should probably be more important than the labor cost. Why there's a low productivity? Because the investment is, quite low. And the problem why there is no investment in labor force is that, we have unskilled labor. We don't have the skilled labor that we could give to the sort of knowledge-intensive industries and companies. And if we compare ourselves to other countries, we see that in Latvia the link between higher education, diploma, and employability is rather weak. And instead of educating people or giving them particular skill set, we should give them, or focus more on providing skills to all. And our universities are ranking poorly in different international ratings, and generally our education system from a ranking point of view is rather poor. So there are two problems that I would like to specifically bring out in general education and higher education. So general education could be improved by much more careful selection of the teachers. So the best teachers should be teaching our children instead of mediocre teachers, being employed because of, low wages. So we should make sure that the best and most talented teachers are working with our children. We have limited number of teachers and the students, therefore further consolidation of school network is required in order to bring up the sort of the figures to or closer to the figures of the developed countries, with much more careful selection of teachers. That's the first problem. It's easier said than done, and Ministry of Education most probably is aware of this problem and they are working on the problem. Now, let's see how they succeed in changing this. Now, when it comes to higher education, what we can see, and there's a lot of evidence supporting that, is one of the challenges that in order to achieve excellence, you need to attract talent. So we should have fewer universities, sort of more powerful universities. We, instead of that, have very fragmented higher education. We have a lot of universities, and professors are sort of running from one university to another, or rather, teaching in several universities, which of course decreases the chance of achieving excellence. And if we look at the indicators, we see that we have smaller universities, a lot smaller compared to the countries where, there are a lot of universities, but countries that have universities in top 100 or top 300 lists. So consolidation to me would be the key word. So what I picked up from you is the consolidation that we need, and it would be very interesting to have the feedback from the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and we'll start with Donna probably. Well, I fully agree with what all is said, and this is exactly what the government is doing, and in terms of teachers' wages. Yesterday we agreed on the increase of the teachers' wage and further optimization of the school network. We are reducing the number of schools, so those teachers who will stay sort of in the system will be paid more, which will ensure that we have probably the best or better teachers working in the universities. And skills-based education is something that the Ministry of Education is working on. It will sort of implement the course of the next 6 years. So skills-based education and technical education is something that we should focus on. I already said that, one of the compulsory exams should be also natural sciences and so on and so forth. Now, what concerns higher education, considering the successful growth, we should come to zero deficit budget. At least the next government should do so. However, we have reached a point where we should start addressing the sort of the challenges of science. We have dealt with police wages and teachers' wages are now sort of cleared out of the way. So the next step when it comes to budget funding would be to increase the budget funding to national research programs and boost scientific activity. And also the grant of the Latvia for energy research, 2 million going into the energy research in key industrial sectors is a nice move towards what we need here in Latvia. Without the shadow of the doubt, the currency of the future is not the physical money, but the knowledge. Knowledge will be the, tomorrow's currency. And when we talk to startups, and if you look at the startups, in the Silicon Valley, and if you talk to startups, everyone says Stanford University is the place to go. Just recently in Helsinki, we had a huge festival / 10,000 people participating, several thousand participating from Helsinki. Automobile innovation is now, the growing trend. Now, if you take a look at other countries, startups are a large element in all study programs. We see the sort of technological transformation being pushed forward by the universities in Latvia. Unfortunately, we are spiraling down instead of climbing up the rankings. We are sort of falling back in those, or falling down in those rankings. Now, all this mentioned pooling of the resources in schools and universities and focused only on consolidation in the school sector. So would you like to address these as well? Now, when it comes to general education, we're indeed consolidating our general education system, and I hope that we will soon be talking about the quality of schools, the quality of teachers, instead of closing of schools. However, there's one thing that we are good at, VET. We have excellent results. We have wonderful schools, and there are few of them, but they have good results. 60% of the Liepāja, for example, graduates, they enter universities, and they have very good skills, and they are in demand among the employers, and they find it easy to integrate into their new workplace. And VET is excellent compared to general education, where a third are failing to enroll in higher education institutions. We have 52 VETs for 2 million. 52 VETs for a 2 million population, which is again too much, and again consolidation is required. And there was a Erpiva, there was almost a government crisis when we tried to consolidate, Riga Psychology University. Then we also have to agree on 3, 6, well, I don't know, 9 or whatever. I think that we should have 6 centers of excellence, at least in key industries or key education sectors like life sciences, and we should, focus more on creating centers of excellence. And Ministry of Economy, for example, is at the moment putting great emphasis on ICT education, and its international competitiveness. We need 3,000 ICT workers a year, and we have agreed with international companies, including American companies, on them, supporting our ICT education. So we will focus on science now, and all the budget surplus will go into science, and we will be supporting centers of excellence. We can't change it overnight, but we need change very much. Thank you, and let me summarize the discussion in the third sort of panel discussion. We don't have any more time for discussion, but there were quite interesting conclusions of views on the education. So what I heard was pooling or consolidation is necessary in general education, so as to ensure that the best teachers are properly paid and are doing the best job in terms of teaching children, and Dana mentioned that. Then the overall increase of funding for needs for education is what we also heard among the government plans, and although it wasn't specified or it wasn't put that way, but it was said that we should reduce the number of universities, or it was at least told that we will have 9 excellence centers that will sort of attract the university workforce, academic staff, and so on and so forth, and students as well. So these are the sort of the main points that we will continue discussing. I would like to thank the panelists for taking part in the panel discussion, but this is not the end of our discussion. Now we open the floor for your questions and move over to a Q&A session. We have a couple of sort of helpers with portable mics who can come to you and give you the mic. And before you ask the question or provide your comment, just raise your hand and the people with microphones will approach you. And please keep your sort of questions short and concise, and also clarify to whom you're addressing the question.
Good morning. My name's Keith Shannon. I'm the British Ambassador. And first of all, I'd like to thank FICIL, Dr. Sauka and his colleagues at the SSE for putting together this report and presenting it in such an entertaining and imaginative way today. It's good to see that there are some positive indicators in this year's report, and that's very important for me and for my colleagues, my team in the embassy, when it comes to advising potential future British investors to Latvia. It's important that we understand the perceptions of the existing foreign investing community in this country. I'd like to raise one area where there does seem to be a bit more room for development, and that concerns the efficiency of the court system. I appreciate that this is principally the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice, but I'd be very interested to hear from the two ministers present, because it affects their ministries as well. It affects the reputation of the whole government. It affects the reputation of the whole country. I'd be interested to hear what the government is doing or intending to do to address some of the negative perceptions that we've heard about the efficiency of the court system and how it affects the business environment. Thank you.
Well, it's difficult to sort of step into the shoes of the Minister for Justice, but we have been told a number of times that this is a problem from the competitiveness point of view. However, in the recent years, one thing that has sort of emerged, or at least in 1.5 years has emerged, is that we have been efficiently improving the insolvency procedures and the insolvency sort of sector monitoring and scrutiny has been improved and tightened, and we will, see the results sort of shortly, if you will. And that was one of the biggest problems in the judicial system and in insolvency system in particular. So this is something that we have managed to sort of deal with. Well, this also affects the economy, but let me sort of approach it from a different angle. We have improved the performance of the courts, and we are now looking at the length of the proceedings. However, that's not the key problem. To me, the key problem is lack of proper coordination between all the law enforcement agencies, all the players in the judicial system, if you will. We have a rather fragmented sort of system. We have financial or economic crimes police, which is not cooperating with prosecutor's office and the anti-corruption agency. So we should strengthen the coordination and the exchange of information so that they would have enough, evidence and would be aware of the trends and would be able to prosecute successfully or investigate rather successfully for the prosecution different cases that they are dealing with. So from a government perspective, better efficiency of the courts is important, and we are indeed focusing on it, although we didn't really sort of single it out as one of our priorities.
Europe first, sorry.
Thank you very much to the organizers for this discussion. I actually have a lot of questions, but I will just voice one comment. We heard the word diagnosis a lot today. The European Commission is also closely following the Latvia's economic growth and development, and it's also coming forth with its recommendations and advice. And based on previous recommendations, we are also following how these are being implemented, and the next European Commission report will be published in February. And I think that we will have another interesting discussion after the publication of this report, which will also serve as material to think about further actions, and I wish the government courage to continue on their path. I was not surprised to see so much criticism of the tax reform, because the report was implemented or carried out during the period when the reforms had not yet been implemented. So this reflects the doubt and uncertainty that was in existence at the time, but I think that if we ask the same question to these people again, then their attitudes might have changed, and definitely we'll have to look at how these evaluations and assessments have progressed in the next report.
U.S. Ambassador to Latvia. First, I want to thank FICIL this morning and the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga for the work that they do and the leadership that they provide on improving the investment climate here. This is a top priority for the U.S. Embassy here, and we are very proud to work with FICIL. I want to continue the discussion that Keith started on rule of law and corruption, because I think that it is extremely important to American investors here. I have read a number of media reports recently about even when corruption investigations are undertaken, they're often quietly dropped or they simply languish in the court system. And we saw this morning comments on the board from some of the people who were interviewed saying that they've had court cases going on for 7 years, 10 years. And I am wondering what kind of concrete steps you would propose to make the criminal justice system more effective and to increase the rate of successful prosecutions, because I think that nothing can send a stronger message than the effective prosecution of corrupt individuals.
So perhaps we have a comment from our panelist, Mr. Zīle. Well, I think what Arvils already said, that it is important to ensure quality of investigation and the cooperation among various institutions. I think this is the key. As regards the actual criminal proceedings, I'm an economist, not a lawyer, so I can't assess what we can change in the process itself. But I think the foundation, the key is concentrating resources on better coordination among various investigative authorities. As to add on, I don't agree that investigation is the key element. The work of the courts is all equally important, and what we see in Latvia, that yes, indeed, we have to improve the quality of investigations so that the courts or the prosecutor's office don't have to give the materials back to the investigative authorities because they are incomplete. So we need to improve the effectiveness of this work, and also within the prosecutor's office, obviously. But we also have to train our judges, which is a priority for the Ministry of Justice. The training and top-up courses for court staff and judges also. So what we have made steps on is the Unified Information System for or so-called ENG. So this is an inter-institutional information system, the first of its kind in Latvia, and I think that this will improve our work. I think that this is a historical moment because over the years each authority has had its own empire, and this has also created further corruption risks. Obviously, if we have more cooperation among various institutions and authorities, then they are aware that others are looking at them, others are see what they are doing. So obviously, this also brings the risk down. I think that overall, the policy culture and business culture in Latvia is improving. The shadow economy is gradually decreasing, and this goes hand in hand with also shifts in our attitudes and culture. I think we still have time for one or two more questions, so please. Didis Meļķis from newspaper Dienas Business. I'd like to raise the issue of re-emigration measures. So my question would be addressed to Mr. Ašerādens. Thank you. First of all, I have to say that the government is paying a lot of attention to the diaspora. We have about 450,000 Latvians living abroad, and these contacts with the diaspora, both historically the established diaspora as well as the newly emigrated individuals. We are supporting various cultural events, various educational initiatives. I think that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a very good initiative for a diaspora law that will regulate these contacts even further. But several changes are perhaps also planned. So if historically the diaspora worked to help bring about the independence of Latvia, then nowadays their role has shifted, it has changed, and we see that they have now announced that they also want to invest in Latvia. So the diaspora can also be seen as a potential investor. As regards cultural ties, of course, we are maintaining these ties and contacts in culture and education. And as I already mentioned, that we're sort of racing against time in terms of demography and raising salaries. We are hearing from the diaspora that if they were able to obtain decent salaries in Latvia, they would indeed come back. So this 1,000 euro salary is the benchmark that we have set, that we are aiming for. So if we are able to increase the average salary in the country, then we will also sort of give more motivators for people that have left the country to come back. So this 1,000 euro salary is something that is realistic and something that people have mentioned as a realistic motivator. Well, thank you. I think with this we will end our question and answer session. Let us thank our panelists. And now I invite you to our informal part of the event where we'll be